It is the greatest story that's never been told. Like, people may have an idea of what the Paralympics is, but they might not actually know. Like, the whole history behind it, how it started from one man, one vision, getting World War II veterans healthy, and then he decided to create the Paralympics, and now it's like the third largest sporting games in the world. I said that's so important to tell, and we need to share it.
Coming into this before any work is done, what was the film in your head that you wanted to make specific to the Paralympics?
I remember vividly, we were with our previous film was called McQueen, which was until recently on Netflix. And we went to Russia to do a kind of like a premiere special screenings in Russia of McQueen. One of our executive producers, when we told him we're in St. Petersburg, because we were already talking about the Paralympic film at that point, he said, you have to read this story about a girl who was born with spina bifida, put into an orphanage and adopted and brought to the United States. And we were reading this in a cafe in St. Petersburg. We were reading the story of Tatiana.
We were wailing. We were not reading, Peter. We were crying our eyes out.
I was reading and you were wailing. It was quite embarrassing.
And then we started looking around, and a lot of people had amazing stories how they got to there. The challenge of this film was more selecting less people. You need, for an audience to really identify and feel in a film, you need to have enough people for the spread, but at the same time not too many that it gets too diluted. Plus, as Tatiana rightly said so at the beginning, Ludwig Goodman's backstory to get it to where he is as a young man with a young family, Jewish refugee in the UK, somehow getting saved by the UK and getting given an opportunity. But he didn't just use it as an opportunity, he harnessed it and changed the world.
Considering how incredible that story is, you feel like there should be a million movies all about him, and there should be, he should be one of those people.
I said exactly the same thing in an interview yesterday. You kind of like incredible that you're kind of almost reading it for the first time. I watched Crip Camp for the first time. I'd sort of always said I'm not going to watch it while we're working on this film because it's a very different film and I didn't want to be, anyway. So Crip Camp has got these scenes, and I don't know if you remember them, this institution in New York in the 1970s with people with severe disabilities kind of just lying naked on the floor. This is 1970s New York. And you kind of like think, Gutman, if without Gutman, that scene would have been played all over the world. It would be probably the case in the UK. Maybe not, I hope not now, but certainly in the 1970s, the 80s, etc.
Not now in the UK or the US, but it is happening in certain countries.
It is happening in certain countries.
Yes.
And the Paralympics...
The fight is still on worldwide.
Something that really struck me was the kind of vulnerability of people telling their story, because I think we often hear, particularly when the Paralympics is kind of on, there's always a tendency, I guess, to go superhuman, and we don't hear the kind of stories behind it. I think the way you guys tackled letting people tell their story really authentically was really unique.
Yeah, I think it's, my message has always been, ever since I was like a young child, it's not, I learned this growing up like in the orphanage, life isn't about what you don't have, it's what you do with the gifts that you're given, right? So me living life in an orphanage, it was just me. I had just me. I didn't have a wheelchair. I didn't have this. I didn't have that. So I think that was kind of like a little silver lining, was that like I figured out how to do things on my own. And that's what each athlete has figured out. They are using the gifts that they have to their ability and to their advantage. So
what we were really excited, Peter and I, is to have the opportunity to have Ellie Cole looking like a kick-ass, beautiful, sexy, amazing athlete in the water, on top of having the archive footage of it. We were really keen the way we shot you as well and we interviewed you, that you felt beautiful as a woman, but as well beautiful as an athlete at the top of your game.
And I'm so glad that you said that, because it was, mentioned in a couple of interviews, like, Tatiana, do you think this film is like, do you think these athletes are portrayed too beautiful? And I was like, no, not at all. I was like, it's actually like, you could see like an alter ego. Like, people don't understand that like people with disabilities can dress up. You know, they have this image of what we're supposed to look like, right?
Tatiana, I guess question for you is like, how do you feel when you have to be on camera and very public about your personal life and your family life?
The more that you feel uncomfortable, I've always believed that you're on the right path. The reason why people were so vulnerable is because we are trying to say like, hey, we are actually very relatable to everyone in society, because a lot of people, hide their struggles, or some disabilities are not visible, but everyone goes through that struggle.
They were like, we know you can do it. You can do it. And I'm like, no, I have no arms. Please help me. And they're like, nope, sorry, you'll figure it out.
Athletes with tons of money, like football here in the US, or like baseball. Sometimes you're like, how am I relatable to that person? People support the team because it's all like, it's about, the big shebang, the big victory. But I think it's more than that in sport. So I think that's why athletes were willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and honest.
How do you get people to be that honest? Because people are really honest in this film about, I wasn't in the shape of my life and actually I wasn't very good at Beijing. Like, athletes never say that. Like, people are really vulnerable and honest. I just wondered how you got that from people. We
kind of wanted this to be for everyone, and that was very important to us. And one thing that Philip said to us, so Philip, very early on, is he said, don't talk about disabled people, don't collectivize. It's about individuals. And, it's about showing each person's humanity. And then, and we took that to heart. And when we shot interviews, we show the first time, in the interviews, we generally show the close-up first, so that you engage with the person, with the face, with the emotion of that person. We reveal the disability, the wheelchair, the prosthetic in the wide shot.
If you want to talk technically the way we work, we actually always shoot with the camera, one close-up, one wide shot, and we sit very uncomfortably right in the middle of the cameras, or really close to the cameras. And we engage of, our question don't become question, it becomes a conversation. And then the other one of us, because we take it in turn, sits behind the monitors a little further back and pay attention to the editorial elements that we might be missing, or something that we should be digging more, or something suddenly we didn't think about that comes along. So we almost split that, which is not, I don't think it'd be possible if you had one single director.
Also, just one other thing is that we always take care that we make sure that we've met. We met Tatiana in London, in which you were slightly also just making sure that we weren't two Muppets and that we were going to do a good job on this film. But we met in London, and then we hung out and spent time together in Illinois before we started shooting. So there's a kind of like an intimacy between us, a kind of a feeling that we can ask each other anything, and it's becomes very natural. And we do that with everyone. I think it's very, very important.
Whenever the shit hits the fan, then our movement's going to come around and say, hey, you're not doing this to us. We're going to have our games, and we're going to get our message out there, and we're going to help change society and make this planet a better place to live on.